Good evening, Harlem and Harlems of the world. Welcome to Harlem Network News. We have a special broadcast tonight at 7:30, and we are very excited and concerned in terms of many things that are happening in Harlem. For those of you who are just joining us, Harlem Network News is a new media platform. We started at the onset of COVID, and we are still here. We are the voice and the drumbeat of Harlem. And we know that news and information is so critical. And oftentimes on the mainstream media, we're just not covered, or our stories are misrepresented. So the work that we're doing is vital. We can ask ourselves the question, is the media the message, or is the message the media? Very critical. We're on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, HarlemNetworkNews.com, as well as Clubhouse and Twitter. And we're looking to soon live stream and go on public access television to assure that we have a wider viewership. Today is a very special program. We have a representative here from our council member, Kristen Richardson Jordan's office. That is our District 9 right here, which covers Central Harlem. And that is in the person of Ovie Lattimore III. And Ovie is the director, well, actually the legislative and budget director for our city council person. So I'll just let Ovie introduce himself. We love it when our public officials and their offices and all of the stakeholders really come and talk directly to the people, because here at Harlem Network News, we do more than a 2-minute soundbite. We want to make sure that people understand what's happening. So welcome, Ovie. And you can probably break down what that big title means and exactly what you do. Thanks.
I appreciate it, Terry. Thanks so much for giving us a chance to speak directly to folks. I really appreciate your intro. It's definitely been a lot of not a lot of focus on kind of the local work that we're doing. So again, we appreciate the platform. And as you said, I'm the Legislative and Budget Director for Councilmember Kristen Richardson Jordan, which means that basically I work with our whole team in basically trying to actualize our Harlem platform through policy, but then also through kind of the powers that we hold with the budget. And that means basically trying to get as many resources for our community as possible, but then also trying to allocate it to different community organizations and nonprofits that are doing important work within the community. But then we also, as the council has the power to approve and disapprove the city budget, that means we also have a hand in trying to affect where our money's going in terms of the different city departments. So I basically go over the different requests we get for funding within our office, but then also go over the different internal city council kind of documents and information about how we're funding our different departments. And then on the legislative side, basically we're trying to work to put into legislation what's in our platform, which means things around housing, getting tenant protections in there, anything around kind of our aging and our seniors, and basically any part of our kind of our daily lives that we're trying to change and better, we're trying to actually implement it within policy. So that means sending in new legislative requests, trying to put in new laws into action, but then also signing in and working with our other council members and signing on to the different things that they're working on. So I just started, we're a fresh office, just like a lot of the rest of the city council, but definitely learning a lot. And it's been honestly an honor and a pleasure to serve the folks of Harlem. We definitely have a community-centered approach where we have a large constituent affairs team, and I work closely with them to basically try to take the different ideas, different problems that we're hearing from our constituents, and then trying to implement that to what our actual policy, what our actual strategy is going to be. So that was a lot, but if there's any more specific,
okay. Yeah, no, I just think, thank you so much. And for those of you who are just joining us for our special this evening, I'm Terri Wisdom, your host, and I have Ovie Lattimore III with us from our council member, Kristen Richardson Jordan's office. And Ovie, how long have you been with the council member's office? Because you said you're new. Did you start at the onset, or is this a new position? If you could just break that down. Thank you.
Of course, yeah. So I started about 3 months ago in April. We had a lovely legislative director who was a medical student. So she started a residency, which opened up the position. You know, I was very much inspired by the council member's run and had been following her closely, and worked in kind of political adjacent fields. So I reached out and was very fortunate to join the team.
Okay, that sounds good. And because we're always teaching here at Harlem Network News and want to make sure that everyone understands, and particularly our young people, we just look at everybody as a mentor. And, you know, if as your position as legislative and budget director, what are, just briefly, what kinds of qualifications does one have to, you know, step into those shoes?
Sure. I think, you know, trying to understand it, you know, luckily I am kind of part of the community. I grew up in the Harlem and Morningside Heights area. So, you know, being connected to your community, knowing what the community needs, so that then when there is discussion around policy and different kind of budget priorities, that you know how it actually affects the folks that it's supposed to affect. And then also just having some sense of what the different policy directions are going on at the state and federal level. It's all interconnected. And also then what are the new kind of policy pushes that are happening within the city level also. But there's a lot of think tanks, there's a lot of different advocates who are doing important work or trying to get different legislation enacted. So then it's being connected with them to try to basically, see what parts we can actually push forward that align with our platform and again, serve our community.
Okay, well, thank you for that. I know we don't have a really long time, so I really want to jump right in to what happened with the city budget. I guess it was in June that the city budget was passed. And as many of our listeners know, I did have Council Member Gail Brewer come on when we first heard about it. I know she was on the steps of City Hall and really tried to answer like what happened. But I also understand that with this budget, and I guess you can explain what all the tenets of the budget were, but I understand that our council member, Kristen Richardson Jordan, along with 5 other council members, they were the only people that did not vote for this budget. Charles Barron of Brooklyn was one of them. And I believe that, and you can really expound on this, why did council member Kristen Richardson Jordan not vote for that budget? It looks like they were the people that were ahead of the curve and progressive. But what were some of the concerns? And then what happened when the budget was actually passed? And of course, how does it impact Harlem and our community? Thank you.
And then thanks again for giving this opportunity to really dive into this. I mean, I think the first thing that's important is the context. So we're coming out of a pandemic that overwhelmingly affected Black and Brown communities. Our communities were already struggling and facing displacement before the pandemic. And basically we need a massive investment within our communities, especially within areas such as education, health services, and specifically mental health services. And that last part is also crucial when talking about the public safety concern that a lot of folks are having. So we hear a lot about the different shootings, just the different constant barrage of daily news around, unfortunately, violence within our communities. And so when looking at this budget, unfortunately, we saw cuts within the areas that are supposed to address these issues. We saw cuts to the DOE, over $1 billion. We saw cuts to the DOHMH, the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene. We saw cuts to the Department of Homeless Services. We basically saw cuts across the board to key departments that are supposed to address these areas that are most needed now more than ever. We didn't feel comfortable basically voting on a budget that didn't actually support what we believe is needed. There was a lot of, I guess, internal kind of political pressure for folks to go along and to vote for this, just to have a seat at the table, so to speak, and to kind of be a part of further negotiations, or maybe to get, added power in the future moving forward. But our council member and the 5 others really had a strong kind of principled perspective on this budget, and saying that if it didn't really support our communities, that we couldn't go along in supporting it. And other context around this is that we actually took in extra $1 billion in revenue as the city. So it's not like we are in a place where we were losing money and that we had to make tough decisions. No, we were actually taking in extra money from Wall Street, from personal income tax, and folks decided that it was better to allocate this extra money into a rainy day fund, which some people said is the prudent thing. But again, with our communities, it's already a rainy day, especially coming out of a pandemic. So we cannot, look at it as this is not an emergency situation. On top of all the cuts, we did see the NYPD's budget remain the same. So it wasn't like it was something that was across the board. Every single department had the similar cut. And specifically, we were talking about schools. There was a lot of talk about how, because the state was pulling out money and the amount of money that the city was putting in, and also dropping enrollment numbers, that this was something that we could not, that there was, we couldn't stop it. That's simply not true. We added $200 million to charter schools within this budget, but it was very clear, and early on, we got the information, all council members got different briefings from executive budget hearings showing where these cuts were going to hit. And it was very clear to our office, and it should have been clear to all council members' office, that this money was going to be taken out of schools and for very much a permanent and needed areas. This is not something that was extraneous. These are teachers who lost their jobs. So again, we're not going to succumb to political pressure and also try to claim as much crumbs as possible to vote for something that simply looked like an austerity budget. So we felt very comfortable with how we voted. And honestly, we're still very disappointed on how the budget had turned out. But it's not anything that we regret. And then there was a lot of talk after the budget about different kind of repercussions for folks who did vote against it. Again, it seems completely asinine that within a democracy where we have different folks who are supposed to have different ideas to represent their different communities, that any council member could be punished. At the end of the day, it was clear that this punishment was more, in name, that the actual tangibles of what the speaker did with the budget was not a lot. So basically our name or the council member's name was taken off of different funding lines that came out of the speaker's initiative pot. At the end of the day, that doesn't really affect us. As long as our communities are getting the funds that they need, that's the only thing that we care about. Again, the silly political games, it's frustrating, but not our focus. So at the end of the day, we still have the same initiative, member initiative funding. We still have the discretionary initiative funding. And just to break it down, that's basically money that each council member gets to allocate where they fit within their community.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. I'm Terri Wisdom. This is Harlem Network News, and I'm here with Ovie Lattimore from our council member, Kristen Richardson Jordan's office. And we are speaking about the recent budget that passed and the impact of voting. Kristen Jordan Richardson, along with 5 other council members, did not vote for the budget. And at the end of the day, a lot of the council people appeared surprised at the real cuts that happened and the fact that teachers were going to be lost or moved from schools. But our council member, Kristen Jordan Richardson, on this stood firm and knew ahead of time, it was clear that there were going to be a lot of losses that were not helpful for our community. But the concern was, and this is one of the reasons I wanted to actually have you or a council member on to just really clarify, because people were very concerned that because, and like you said, in a democracy, that's not supposed to be, or in America, that's not supposed to be, where you're punished for your vote. But there was concern that because our council member, District 9, did not vote for the budget, that we were going to have some financial sanctions. So it is my understanding, and you clarify this, that we actually didn't get the sanctions, and this is something that Gail Brewer explained as well, that the money and the line budgets were still there, but those that did not vote for the budget, their names were not there, but the money was still not there. But even that, to me, as a citizen, is extremely concerning. So I don't know what we can do about it, but it's extremely concerning because, as you stated, especially in a community like Harlem, we were in a pandemic before there was a pandemic. We've been in a pandemic for 400 years. And so when the pandemic actually hit, we got hit harder than anybody else. So if you could kind of explain that, and if there's anything that can be done about that, or, you know, because moving forward, especially with all the challenges that we have in the city, it appears to me and Harlem Network News that we really need to work in a cohesive manner.
So yeah, I mean, the good news is, despite the kind of challenges and kind of the unfortunate political shenanigans that, you know, seem to be classic of all kind of political machines, is that we still have a clear vision, and we still have, you know, again, our own discretionary funding and our own member designated initiatives where we can try to use it in creative ways to kind of uplift our communities and do it in ways that haven't been done before. So we really have a bottom up, a grassroots a vision and approach to how we're going to do our funding and how we kind of do everything within our office. So one of the key new initiatives that our office started up was the Summer of Hope. And that program is basically to build community, to build kind of the village within Harlem. And that's through every day being out in the community with different activities that can attract both kids and their parents, and basically offer a safe space for folks to have food, again, engage in different activities, but again, also just basically figure out who their neighbors are and come together. These are different kind of funding areas that we're creating ourselves, and we're working with great community partners such as Parents Supporting Parents, Black Opportunities Incorporated, which was started by one of the co-founders of Black Lives Matter, Greater New York, Hank Newsome. Tanisha Grants is the person who's been doing great work within our community. She runs Parents Supporting Parents. So again, this is not one person. It's not the council members starting all these initiatives. We really are tapping into the folks who are doing the important work already.
Okay. So this is Harlem Network News, and I'm here with Ovie Lattimore from Council Member Kristen Richardson Jordan's office. And we basically just spoke about the budget and how it impacted, and, you know, basically that our funds are still intact. And then we segued to speak about the Summer Hope Program, which is a new initiative that was started by the council member's office. And you said the Summer Hope Program takes place every day from 4 to 8. Do you know where are the locations, and what are some of the things that are being done, and who can actually participate, and why, and where can more people find out about the Summer Hope Program?
Sure. So again, this is going to be taking place across various locations. We want to include all of Harlem, so we're moving around every single day. Tomorrow, just to let folks know, I don't think our tables will be out just due to the severe weather that we're hearing. But moving forward, you know, on July 25th, we're going to be on West 104th Street between Adam Clayton Powell and Lenox Ave. On July 26th, on the 26th, which should be the first day because that's Tuesday, we're on West 129th Street between Frederick Douglass Boulevard and Adam Clayton. On the 27th, on Wednesday, we're going to be at East 115th Street in Madison Ave. So we're moving around. You can find all these dates on our Instagram page on Kristen for Harlem. We have an Instagram post that shows all of our upcoming locations and dates. And again, this is a way that we're supposed to tap into our local community partners who are already doing this great work, so we can promote them, but then also, again, connect folks with great resources, and then also have a nice safe space where they can just enjoy their family and their company.
Okay, so with the Summer Hope, are the streets closed off and people are communing? And what are the metrics of measurement as to how Summer Hope is helping? So
basically, you know, we have a new approach of how we can build safety and how we can build community. And we believe that we can't just do it through over-policing. We already have one of the highest police per capita counts in the country. So doubling down in funding within just policing and do a carceral approach versus actually funding different supportive services is not going to be a way that we can actually get out of the current problems that we're facing. So through this initiative, it's not just going to be the Summer of Hope that's going to fix all of our problems, but by offering basically different ways for community engagement, but also building up different, as I said, community partners who are doing this work, we believe that it's a first step in looking at alternatives to public safety. So, I don't think there's any specific metrics we're looking at, and I think a lot of times we do see folks get really caught into just participation numbers or whatever basically they can quantify to try to give reason why this is such an important program. But this is a new initiative that basically we want to just do to build community and then use it in conjunction with some of our other new initiatives, such as our Greener to Greener initiative, where we're basically going to be going to different major parks, Marcus Garvey, Jackie Robinson Park, St. Nicholas Park, and trying to beautify it and also make them even more environmentally friendly than they already are. So basically by adding hydroponics and doing other, as I said, kind of beautification and working with partners, we're trying to have a community that really reflects the beauty that we know already exists.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for that. I know that your office has some initiatives like a housing committee and several committees that are meeting, addressing stuff. I think even the street vendor committees are meeting. So could you just share a little bit about that and, how this is part of the new approach? Thank you.
So yeah, as I said, we have new structure that we're trying to implement, which is heavy on constituent services. And another part of that is through our task forces. So we have a housing task force, we have a vendor task force, we have a mental health task force, we have an environmental task force. And basically all of these are started with different folks from our council member's office, mostly folks who are part of the constituent affairs team. I had the housing task force, but then they are open to the public and for the constituents. And it's a way for them to directly engage, not just with our office, but again, with their neighbors and peers, and we can bring together the different skills and different insights that different folks have around specific topics. So, I'm not despite having an interest in housing and being up on the different policies around housing, I don't have the same insight that an architect may have, or someone who's been living in the community for 50 years. So this is a way for different folks to come and sit and address the different problems they're seeing, but also give different ideas they think that can remedy these problems. So it's a way that we can, again, be directly involved with the community, and the community can have its voice actually heard, and then actually try to actualize what they're actually saying instead of just hearing it, saying something nice and doing something separate.
Okay, thank you for that. I guess there's just such great concern, and this is Harlem Network News. I'm Terri Wisdom. I'm here with Ovie Lattimore of our council member, Kristen Richardson Jordan's office. And we're talking about some of the task force that our council member has set up. And obviously, housing is a very, very critical issue. As many of you know, and I do believe that our council member, Kristen Richardson Jordan, has been at the helm of a few very critical issues here in the community. Right here at Lenox Terrace, when the whole strip mall was burned down, I do believe that our council member, Kristen, did not stop until we actually were able to find out that it was arson. I don't know if we found out who it was, but this is all concerning, particularly because the Olnick group was interested in putting like 5 other buildings that, were, high rents. And then suddenly a whole section burned down and now it's bulldozed. And I don't know what's happening next with it. So that was one issue. And then our other issue was the 145 project, which was, vetoed by the Community Board 10, of which I'm formally a member. It was also vetoed by the Borough President's Office. And eventually the project was pulled at the City Council level. But I don't know if you have some insight into what's happening with that project now, because certainly the people that were at the helm of the project, they own that land. Exactly. So can you give us a breakdown or an update on any of those 2 items?
Yeah, sure. With the first item with Lenox Terrace, I would have to check in with the kind of police and enforcement just to see kind of where they are with that investigation. We have not gotten any updates on that end, although again, hearing the circumstances, it's beyond trouble. So it's something that our office will again continue to monitor and we will definitely reach back with an update as soon as we have one. In terms of 145, you're exactly right. You know, after a lot of community uproar and pushback, they did pull the proposal a day before the city council was supposed to vote on it. There was a lot of late changes, but you know, the long story short with that is that it did not offer actual affordability and did not actually have units that would be for the people of Harlem. And there was going to be a crazy, basically, a crazy amount of new luxury and market rate units that would be going into an area of the building that did not meet the context of the surrounding area. So we were happy when they pulled the proposal, but we are still basically engaging with the developer to see what they are trying to do with that land. Right now, as of right, they can only build a smaller building with about 40 residential units, and then also probably some additional commercial, commercial buildings, I guess, within that lot. But we would love for them to sell it to a nonprofit or a community partner who would be interested in actually providing housing for the people of Harlem and actually providing affordable housing. So we have had multiple meetings directly with that developer talking about what that price would be. And also on the other side of that, been talking with different nonprofits to see who would be willing to try to create a consortium to actually buy that land. Again, this is very, early within these talks. It just got pulled not too long ago, and there's a lot of money to be made by this developer, so it makes it difficult. But we are not giving up on actually using that land for the people of Harlem.
Okay, thank you for that. And I asked that question because I know things happen, people hear 2-minute sound bites, then they don't hear what's happening again. So it's very critical because all of these things impact everyone who lives here directly. I mean, one of the concerns even in terms of building those towers was the fact that the area is already saturated, in terms of the subway station can barely manage the people that's there. And I think that that's happening a lot all over the city as developers are getting to build these buildings. There's no consideration for what the true saturation is in the area. The other thing that I would move to, and I'm not sure if this is still directly in Councilmember Kristen's jurisdiction, but it's the Esplanade Gardens situation, where they have had some capital improvements. There's really a lot of the people who are in Esplanade Gardens, and I have had them on Harlem Network News several times, and we are a voice for Esplanade Gardens because there are many senior citizens in there and they are suffering the work. Some of them, have not been able to use their bathrooms. There were porta potties. The people that are doing some of the construction, I believe one of them is Laddie. They've come to the board and spoken, but they have occupied like about 18 apartments, which cuts into the revenue because it's a Mitchell-Lama co-op. I know that one of the construction people spoke about the pool being finished by this summer. This pool is still filled with dirt. It hasn't happened. So there's a lot of disenfranchisement, and the people are still paying their rent. So is your office familiar with that situation, and have you been coordinating with those members as well?
Yeah, I personally met with some folks from Esplanade Gardens, and it's something that we are actually actively monitoring. One of the biggest challenges that we've seen is the fact that we have tenants in HDFCs, tenants in niche developments who basically are living in a different, or not getting the proper living standards that they deserve. In repairs that they've been reporting, that they're doing the right thing in terms of trying to reach out to get the help they need. And there hasn't been that response that they, again, respect, that they deserve. So what we're looking to do right now is we're both actively meeting with HPD to see kind of what is the different systems they have in place to make sure that they actually are doing the code enforcement that they're supposed to do. But then also why they aren't, in some ways, being responsive enough and trying to potentially added accountability to make sure that when folks do have these problems that consistently linger, that there is some type of response and that there is repercussions for the folks who are supposed to be delivering with these different repairs. So we will be introducing new legislation to basically add additional oversight, to have almost a civilian complaint review board, but specifically with housing. And we're also looking specifically at HDFCs, because we've heard extreme amount of complaints coming from them, not just about repairs, but then also about discrimination from folks on the board, and that it's basically completely sometimes unequal treatment, depending on the different subsidies that folks are receiving, which is completely unacceptable. So that's one of our top priorities for new legislation that we're turning in. And then also, again, we do have the ability to hold hearings and oversight hearings within the City Council. And that's something that we're looking to do also with HPD around specific programs that they have that we have been hearing a lot of complaints about.
Okay, I will clap it up on that, because, you know, with HPD being the agency that they are, they really are overseeing a lot of these, you know, buildings and developments. And so, you know, it seems like HPD would be your go-to person. But if all of this is going on and HPD is in there, then somebody's got to get in and see what's happening. I'm also glad that you mentioned the NYCHA, you know, situation, and maybe you can shed some light and clarity for our offices on this, because it's an understanding that within NYCHA, that privatization has already begun to happen. Mm-hmm. A lot of people in the community, you know, when I try to follow the paper trail here at Harlem Network News, but, you know, we're thinking, oh, privatization is coming, but it appears that privatization is happening in NYCHA. And then it appears there's something called Title IX and the trust that Governor Hochul spoke about. Mm-hmm. And it was, you know, through talking with other people, and that's why I love Harlem Network News, because folks come in and they drop knowledge, you know. And so it's my understanding that if you don't get one of those vouchers, and everybody, as horrific as the climate is in some of the NYCHA buildings, these people pay rent. They're not living there for free. And some people are paying as much as $2,000 rent because they are having to pay 1/3 of what their income is. You know, so I don't think you get put out if your income's this, but you've got to pay 1/3 of your income. And given the climate in terms of where else can you move in a city where, you know, everything is like off the chart, this is concerning. But the concern is that there aren't enough vouchers for everybody in NYCHA to actually become part of the trust. So it means people could be further displaced. Do you have insight into that, Ovie?
Yeah, you know, again, this is connected actually to the budget and to just general, you know, I guess trends on where our funding is going to. So there has been continuing disinvestment from NYCHA for the past 20, 30, 40 years. That comes from the federal government, but also from the state and the city government as well. There's another reason, one of the reasons why we voted against this budget, because it was not getting enough funding so that NYCHA would operate at a somewhat respectable level. We're still going to be operating at a loss for the next 5-10 years where current funding is. So now, because we're in such a bad place in terms of the lack of funds that are going to repairs and everything that's needed so that these people can live in the dignity, respect that they deserve, they're looking at basically this private partnership. And that was started through the RAD, which is called PACT on the local level. And you're exactly right. That's where NYCHA is becoming privatized, because they work with private developers who come in to do this work, but then they will literally become the owners over time. So that is privatization, plain and simple. And there has been increased displacement within the NYCHA developments that have become privatized. There are studies that show that. So it's disconcerting and it's a problem.
Could you, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but could you just repeat that? Because I want to make sure that our audience is taking it in. You said within the NYCHA development, there's been increased and
the people being pushed out pretty much.
Okay, all right.
These repairs are done. You know, there's some money to be made, you know, on getting folks who are paying less in or who are receiving more subsidies. Again, it's taken them out of more secure kind of Section 9 kind of housing, which is purely public, and putting them on kind of Section 8, where you're then, as you said, receiving vouchers. And there is worry, if Republicans, because Section 8 vouchers are coming from the federal government, if you do have a Republican legislator that takes over, there could be a concern that there is not enough money going to those Section 8 vouchers, but then people who rely on them can't actually access them to pay the gap in their rent that they need. So that's one of the concerns also when you take people off of Section 9, you move them over to Section 8. So that was RAD or PACT, that's the local name for it. That's the kind of push to privatize NYCHA. Now, the second option or the new thing that they've come out with is the NYCHA Public Trust. They're saying, hey, if you don't want to basically have your buildings privatized, there's this new public trust that can then offer some of the repairs that are needed. Now, this is a brand new program, and it's something that honestly, our office was still trying to get as much information about, but there is concerns, because we don't want to just come down without any information. We like to know what we're talking about before we start talking about it. But there is concerns about it in terms of who is going to be on the board of all of these different trusts for the different developments. And in terms of also then what is the security of making sure, as I was saying, because even with the NYCHA Public Trust, people are getting moved over to that Section 8 voucher. So still there's going to be a little bit less security and still going to be just dependence on continued subsidies. So that's one reason for concern. And also then, again, who is then getting on the boards of these different developments, that's also a concern. And then there's also right now just a complete lack of public knowledge of it. So we know that there's a lot of tenant association presidents who obviously are aware of this new public trust, but a lot of the residents themselves just lack information. And that's a problem when they're signing on to things that is going to affect their lease and it's going to affect potentially their financial well-being moving forward. So irregardless, if the NYCHA Public Trust can actually be a possible solution instead of privatization, or if it's something that is just kind of a longer route to privatization, there just needs to be more information on it. And that's one of the things that we're trying to do right now. And we're doing a lot of outreach within different NYCHA developments to let people know what PACT is, what the NYCHA Public Trust is. And again, in our eyes, the best solution is just to fund NYCHA. It's public housing, put public funds to public housing. It seems simple, but again, we're operating within a more moderate conservative kind of playbook, which we saw with the budget, and it seems to be continued here as well.
Okay, well, thank you for sharing that. This is Harlem Network News, and I'm Terri Wisdom, and I'm here with Ovie Lattimore, and he is the Director, Legislative and Budget Director for our council member, Kristen, District 9. I'm shortening that. But we've been talking about the housing situation, but in a broad stroke, a broad brush, it's very difficult to just understand. I mean, in our past primary in June, only 2% of New York City even voted. And that's not 2% of Harlem, that's 2% of the city. And, it just appears that in a world where people are fighting voter suppression, here in New York, we can vote for the most part, but it just feels like there's a lot of apathy. And there are just people who don't feel like whatever they do matters anyway. And so, I mean, the concern is from your office, our district, what is the connection with the mayor? How is the mayor doing in terms of what's happening here in our district and overall? Because to me, and this is not anything on the mayor, but just overall with what's happening in government, particularly in this city, New York City, which is a microcosm, everybody can see that there's a homeless problem. Everybody can see there's a mental health problem. You know that every day. If you're in your car, you lock your doors and pull your windows up because you don't know what's going to happen. Literally, and I didn't think quickly enough. I was on 86 and First Avenue, and I literally saw a man, and I didn't know what he was doing, but whatever the flowers were in front of the building, he was pulling them up from the roots and like throwing them down on the ground. So this is like extreme. He pulled up, I don't know how many beautiful potted, they weren't even potted, but he just pulled them from the roots and threw them down. So that is really a microcosm of what is going on in our city. And then you hear, you know, on the news, the mainstream news, that the mean average rent in New York City is now $5,000, and that we don't have enough space for people to live, and that, you know, they're trying to see if they could turn office buildings into it. So people that are going to pay this mean $5,000. So, I mean, it just doesn't seem like how our grandmother used to say, common sense. Common sense is not prevailing. There should be a moratorium on building any high rises, any expensive buildings here in Harlem that the community can't afford. And there should be an infusion. We need extra money here. You know, if there was $1 billion that was for a rainy day, as you said, we are the rainy day. So what can we do about it? Because it's extremely frustrating, you know, when even those that are voting, you know, are getting out there, you know, there are people who are working, you know, with a council person. But what can we do? Because it appears that the mean mindset is not one of common sense. Yeah. And we're just going off railing off the track. No, what can we actually do?
I think you're exactly right. I think one of the first things that we can do is what you're doing right now, and that's why I thank you again for the Harlem News Network, Harlem News Network.
Harlem Network News.
Sorry, Harlem Network News. My apologies. But having these conversations about kind of how we're addressing these different issues that are popping up, and making sure that we're actually spreading accurate information instead of just going on kind of media narratives really around these different kind of problems. And I think when you have these media narratives, they're very much shaped by the powers that be, but also through kind of tradition and kind of old ideas that we've been kind of replaying and replaying. So, you know, the mayor's approach to homelessness is really just to sweep them under the rug. And that's what we saw with the encampment cleanups, where basically different private property was taken from folks, and these folks were just taken out of the spaces. Now, does that solve the systematic problem that we kind of see? No, it does not. It would actually start to solve that problem is actually starting to fund the social services that are needed for these folks, so they can get the mental health and the substance, the substance care that they need. You know, and those are the exact areas that did not get the funding within the budget. You know, again, we kind of have had this tough guy, you know, a lot of vibrato around a crime and talking about how it's his city, and all that stuff is posturing. You know, at the same time, he does try to tap into some of the progressive lingo of actually providing mental health, and that this does not actually happen. You know, we have a lot of folks who are talking about, hey, we got to make sure these people have the support services needed. Well, we had the chance to do that. That was with the budget, and people decided not to. You know, so there is this cognitive dissonance really between what a lot of our elected officials are saying and what they're actually willing to do. And a lot of these problems are radical. So you need new ideas, new solutions to actually effectively solve them. What you said about actually having memorandum at actually upzoning, and this is something that some other activists have said, because upzonings have disproportionately happened within Black and Brown communities. We know this.
Absolutely.
And we know that within those same communities, there has been displacement. They're not doing upzonings in Park Slope, in Greenwich Village, and other majority white affluent areas, okay? So if we're seeing displacement, if we're after upzonings, yet we need housing, we have to get creative. We have to say, you know what, until we know the exact impact that's gonna happen from this building, we gotta put up a hold and actually figure out different, more creative ways to infuse affordable housing units within this area. So that is just kind of a new type of thinking that unfortunately, we're not seeing reflected by this mayor. Again, our mayor is running out a 1990s playbook that even in the 90s, you know, it didn't work too well, especially for Black and Brown folks. It's a carceral, reactive a way of doing things that's not gonna work for our Black and Brown communities, the communities that actually need funding, support, and radical love to actually move us forward. So, you know, I'm proud to be a part of an office where we're actually trying to take a step back and think of new ways to fix problems instead of just trying to repeat the status quo. But again, it takes the actual community from getting together and actually knowing about these issues to actually try to push these things forward, especially when it comes to voter turnout. But it's gonna be tough for folks to come out to vote, right? We have like a new city council that is, you know, one of the most diverse that has ever. Yet, what do they do with the first budget? We pump up the budget.
It's like preposterous. And I this is Harlem Network News. I don't understand it. And I said, you know, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a politician. I'm a citizen. And Harlem Network News is very critical because we want to make sure people understand. But like you said, with this diverse city council and people who you believe understand what's going on, that's got to translate into the budget. It's got to translate into what's legislated. And otherwise, it's a trickle down, and the quality of life is getting worse and worse. And it's extremely severe. And like I said, you know, if a man, it was a white male, but if he was on 86th Street, like in some shorts, pulling flowers up out the flower garden and throwing them down, that is a sign of just the extreme erosion and frustration of what is happening here.
Yes.
So, you know, I mean, we call on all the public officials, stakeholders. We know what the problems are, and it's a trickle down. It comes from economic disparity. It trickles down to housing. Then that trickles down to mental health because of the stress that people are in. It trickles down to education, which we haven't even really spoken about, because the education here in Harlem, which you know, 99.99% of the children in our schools, the public schools, are Black and brown children. And the quality of education that they're getting is separate, and it's not equal. So why is the charter schools getting infused? So, you know, there's so many questions, and we're just being targets for this. So, you know, I appreciate the fact that your office is looking at some of the solutions, but I think it's got to be broader. You know, I don't know how we can really impact the mayor, call him the task. I mean, I know that he came for a town meeting about the budget at PAL, but once again, a lot of people really didn't know about that. So this is why information, knowledge is power, you know, so it's very critical. So we're winding down. One thing, I just have one question for you. This is Harlem Network News. I'm Terri Wisdom, and Ovie Lattimore is here from Councilman Kristen Richardson Jordan's office. Do you know what's happening with the shelters? Because, you know, ear to the ground, people do call me because we're Harlem Network News. And it's my understanding that we're getting a great influx of immigrants who have come in from the West Coast, and now they're getting sent here to New York City, and our shelters are filled up, and we're having to like get some hotels to put them in because they don't have any other services. They're just getting here. You know anything about that?
I haven't heard specifically about immigrants coming from out west that are filling
Yeah.
I haven't heard specifically about that complaint, and something that I definitely now will.
Yeah, this is new. This is happening as we speak. Okay. You know, and so, like I said, ear to the ground, people call me, they tell me this going on, that's going on. So that might be something that your office might want to look into.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, you heard it here.
Yeah.
You might want to look into it because we have more shelters in our area disproportionately as well.
Yeah.
But now they're bringing folks from across the country. And, you know, it's my understanding this might be a political thing from the Republican side. I don't know.
Well, yeah, I was unaware of that. We'll definitely check it in on that. And that's why, again, I'm happy I'm here so that we can also.
Okay. Yeah. So one last question, and then I'll let you close out. What are the meetings? Are you meeting with the vendors on 125th? Because that's another call of concern that I got. You know, we have different constituents who will call me, and you know, there's a concern as to the relationship with the vendors on 125th and what's actually happening. Yeah. So if you could just break that down.
Yeah, that's one of you know, the utilities of our vendor task force. So again, Robert Jackson, one of our great members of our constituent affairs team, has led that. And basically they're starting to form out their own internal structure and try to almost get increased organization within the different vendors, but then also hearing about, you know, the different ways that they can operate. So we're trying to also have different folks who are not even vendors still kind of participate in those meetings. So there can be some kind of common understanding of what are the best approaches and practices But we know also that a lot of our street vendors come from our community, offer a lot of great culture and value to our community. So we also want to work with them to make sure they have the protections and kind of paperwork in order, so they can do what they're doing in a way that they're safe and not going to be bugged by the police. So we also are in talks with the Empire Development Corporation about the 125th mark, which has been, there has been a lot of talk for the past 20 years about actually renovating it and making it a, what it should be, on 125th Street, a nice center of activity. And those talks are actually going very well now. So we're hopeful that we can have our vendors be actively part of that planning and have that be a nice kind of outlet for street vendors to, to conduct their business on, and have it done in a little bit more the organized and structured way than has been done in the past. Okay,
well, we thank you for that, because that's another Harlem travesty, the 125th Street Mart. At a point, it was really thriving, it was indoor. There was so many different, beautiful things to buy. Most people, when they did their holiday shopping, they went there. It was totally an asset. I don't know the backstory, but in a New York City, in a major thoroughfare like 125th, for a building and structure like that to sit vacant for 25 years is travesty. As you said, there's no shortage of money in this city, so why would that be allowed here in the Harlem community? Granted, we've gotten a lot of the chains that we've never had before, be it Verizon or HNN or whatever it is, but why would that not be addressed? So I think we have a lot of, major things to address that are coming at us, from every angle, but you have to start somewhere. Yeah. But we want to make sure that, I'm Terri Wisdom, this is Harlem Network News. We want to make sure that we're able to chip away at it, because things are moving so quickly. Okay, so do you have any closing words, Ovie, or a summary of the different things that we've gone over, and where your office is and what the parameters of District 9 are, and how folks can get involved, what's the website, phone number, any of those things, but closing statements and overall in terms of how you think Council Members Kristen, Richardson, Jordan's office is doing, because we're kind of at the 6-month mark. I think the last time I had her on, we were at the 4-month mark. So how do you think you've been doing, and what have you been able to really accomplish in terms of goals?
Yeah, again, I just want to start off in saying thank you again for having the platform, especially with all the different news and information that was going around the budget, to be able just to directly speak to folks, to let them know kind of what it was and kind of what it is, and again, also the real effects that it has on Harlem. So I appreciate that. In terms of, just our office getting underway here, I think it's been a great learning experience, but also one where we've had some real results early. And I think that comes from having a clear vision and also a clear connection to our community and putting them first, always when we're trying to make decisions. So I think that's manifested itself, as we previously highlighted, in terms of having a building that the community did not want, a massive upzoning on 145 and getting that pulled. That only happens from clear partnership from community boards, different associations, and then also our office. And that's something that we're just going to continue on with. And we're also going to continue to try to pressure our colleagues. And we hope that folks who are listening to this who are not in district also do organize and pressure your elected official to actually represent your interests, not real estate's interests, not finance interests, but your interests. And again, we're going to continue to have our housing task force meetings, where we hope that anyone who has an interest, whether it be in housing, if you're a street vendor, if you have just an interest in kind of the environment, that you get involved. If you go to KristenForHarlem.com, we'll have a calendar that will show all of our upcoming meetings. Again, these are open and a great way to discuss with our team what you want to see within your own community. We also have pretty much an open door policy within our district office. It's right on 135th Street and Adam Clayton. It's right across the street from the Old Y, or we are the Old Y, right across the street from.
Right.
And again, we will be in office. Kristen is there most days of the week when she doesn't have to be dragged downtown to vote on something. And we're talking with folks. So please come in and say hey. And we just look forward to working with the community even more and continue to actually serve the community.
Okay, well, thank you for that. And I also implore our council member to really reach out to the mayor, the borough president. I know we had, you know, the meeting that was at the Powell Center with the mayor, but I think really we need to have a sit down here in Harlem. Our circumstances are different than other circumstances, and we are the people who are bleeding the hardest and taking the most scrapes and the most hits. So I think, you know, maybe there can be a way that, you know, council member can just get Mayor Adams, the borough president, and, you know, she the city council, that's the city line, to really look at what's happening here and that some special funding be created from somewhere. I know that they're trying to fill some of the education gaps with some federal monies, but like Harlem needs, we need a vaccine.
Mm-hmm.
We need a vaccine here.
Exactly right.
So that we need some infusion,
mm-hmm.
and that really needs to happen, you know, as the violence just, you know, scales up, and that has to do with stress. And could you just give us a brief situation in terms of COVID and all of what's going on here, because nobody's wearing masks. I mean, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of folks, and again, I think this has shown the dominance of business interest over actual community interest. Would like to pretend this pandemic is over. It's not. COVID numbers are rising. We hope that everyone takes precaution, mask up, get tested, get a booster. But yeah, COVID numbers are rising. In fact, we also are having monkeypox. Again, this is the severity of it. We're just getting information on it, so don't want to cause alarm to folks. But we do have some of those numbers on the rise as well. Again, how lethal it is, you know, it's not the same thing as COVID, but it is something for folks to be aware of. So our constituent affairs folks are actively going into communities, trying to spread whatever information we get from the Department of Health to make sure that folks are just up on it, and also making sure that we have access to the different vaccines. So that's something that we've been actively in conversation with the mayor's office, among other different issues as well. Yeah, so it's an ongoing present situation, but definitely everyone, I hope, just take the proper precautions.
Okay, yeah, because also from the last mayor's office, Mayor de Blasio's office, there was a task force or some kind of task force on race, a task force on mental health, and there was like some $1 million sunk into it. And I believe the first lady was overseeing that. I mean, did that carry over, do you know? But nobody ever knew what that did anyway.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so I mean, these are just some critical stuff, because even in the census, a lot of money is made off the backs of disparity in Harlem, and then the people never see that money. It doesn't translate into change.
Mm-hmm.
So we got a lot of work to do, but we started by getting the information out. Thank you for your transparency. And this is Harlem Network News. I'm Terri Wisdom, and we're very grateful that Ovie, who is representing Council Member Christian Richardson Jordan's office, has come to speak to us. It's very critical that at least we have conversations, and that our public officials and our stakeholders are touchable and accountable, and that we can find them. So very critical. So we appreciate it. And Harlem Network News is going to continue. We continue to, you know, look for funding, look for support, so that we can really get out there and do what's necessary, because a lot of our community is just not informed, and they're not getting it on a New York 1 or Channel 4. They're getting a 2-minute soundbite, and whatever's being said is not clear. Or they're getting, like, if there's a gunshot, and, you know, we must just give our prayers for all of those that have lost life, because it's too many, and they're young, innocent people, like the basketball player that lost his life. You know, it just goes on. The woman pushing a baby carriage, you know, it's just, it's, I can't even speak about it. And this is near and dear to me, because I lost my son November 5th to gunshot. So we got to keep working. And those agencies like Jackie Rowe Adams, Home of the Save, and so many other agencies. And I will give a shout out to Mind Builders. They're not here in Harlem, but you can still go there. They're in the Bronx, and they have a great organization called Positive Youth Troop that really works with young people for art, and is a good concept. They work with young people for art and dance and musical theater, but they also have like a psychological counselor that works with the young people as well. So I know the Respect program here in Harlem is doing great things with young people too. The arts change lives, but the component of actually having mental health coordinators in there, and it allows the young people to really express themselves and talk to people. So we got to be doing a lot more of that. But anyway, thank you for joining us, and we're going to continue to do the work. And Harlem Network News, you can find us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, HarlemNetworkNews.com, Clubhouse. And this show will be rebroadcast tomorrow evening about the same time, 7:30. So if you missed it, and once it's up on our YouTube channel, you can always go back to it. There's lots of information and great people that come. And certainly you can go to Harlem Network News at gmail.com and reach out to us, or 646-261-5397. And certainly ideas, story ideas, if you see something, say something, call us. And we do accept donations, so thank you. All right, Ovie, so pleasure to meet you. Give our kind regards to the council member, and we'll have to drop in on some of those meetings, task force meetings. And like I said, people do call me, so that's why I wanted to get some concerns about the vendors on 125th. So thank you. Thank
you for the chance. Pleasure meeting you.
All right. Have a great day. Great. Doing a good job. Keep it up. Thank you.